No, she's there, but not there. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those that are now populating the room. So thank you for joining us today. Hello, Cynthia. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you. Good morning to all.
And Jacqueline, I see you there. So thank you.
Good morning. Good
I'm going to
morning.
be introducing you for next week's speaker, Noura Kazi. Nice
Yes,
to see
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Joan and Om, nice to see you too. And Valerie, you're here. Fantastic.
Hi, Greg. Oh, yes, I'm here, Greg. How are you?
Thank you, sir.
I'm very good. Catherine, it's always good to see you, Catherine Klein. And
Same
Zena.
here. Thank you. Dedicated
Hi,
viewer.
Cynthia.
Hello.
We have a lot of our regulars coming into the room, so that's very good. We'll kick off in a few minutes.
Okay, now I'm going with you. They all saw me.
All right. Hello. Good morning, Mark. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Eileen from Ireland.
Eileen, it's always good to see you, and you're one of our regulars, so it's fantastic.
Oh yeah, you recharge my batteries every Friday.
That's good. Recharged for the positive things you're going to be doing over the weekend.
Yeah, that's great. I enjoy it. It's marvelous.
Yeah, that's great. So, Jun, we might actually kick off.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And because it's just 7:01.
Yeah, of course. Happy Friday. Welcome to the IFA Global Cafe in conversation with experts. My name is Jun, and I will briefly review housekeeping. We will begin this virtual cafe with opening remarks, which will be followed by a moderated question and answer session. Please use the chat function along the bottom of your screen to indicate you have any questions or comment, and we will call upon you to pose your question during the moderated discussion. If you have any resources to share, please do that as well. The virtual cafe is recorded and streamed live on the IFA's Facebook page. The video recording and resources will be made available on the IFA's website, and you will receive a follow-up email with the next invitation. Now it is my honor to introduce the Director, International and Corporate Relations of the IFA, Mr. Greg Shaw.
Thank you very much, Jun, and it's wonderful to see everyone, and I'm very pleased to be moderating today's session. The Cafe series really aims to be a point of connection for all colleagues working in the field of ageing and on behalf of millions of older people. It's an opportunity to share information about emerging trends, stories of the resilience and courage of older people, while gaining a deeper understanding of the barriers being experienced and the solutions being created in partnerships. In that respect, what I can tell you is that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, people will be receiving a link to a survey where we'll be asking our readers, our readership, and those that attend the cafes, their feedback on the cafe series in terms of, are there speakers that they haven't heard from that they would like to hear from? Are there topics that we haven't covered that should be covered, or even topics that we've covered before that perhaps we should cover again? So keep an eye out for that survey request that will be coming your way in the next few weeks. Today, it is my honour and pleasure to actually introduce our speaker, Dr. Cynthia Bullock, on the topic of addressing inequalities through multidisciplinary innovation. Dr. Bullock leads the innovation activities across the UK government, government's £98 million Healthy Ageing Challenge, supporting the development and delivery of products and services that will allow people to remain active, productive, independent, and socially connected across generations for as long as possible. Cynthia has a background in health research, innovation and commercialization, having trained initially as a biochemist and a molecular biologist. Most recently, she led the delivery of health and life science programs at the Innovate UK, the UK's innovations agency, representing over 400 million pounds in investment across therapeutics, medtech, diagnostics, and digital health technologies. Cynthia has an executive MBA, and I'm very pleased to welcome Cynthia today. And Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, everyone. And yes, I have to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm thrilled. For me, it's 12 noon, so it's a really good time, but I appreciate for others it's quite late and very early morning. So I'd like to start by thanking the IFA for the invite to share my thoughts at the Global Cafe. It's not often you get an invite and the host says, it's entirely up to you what the topic should be. My topic of choice, I'm well aware, is not an easy one. It's hard to hear. It's difficult, it's emotive, but I think also worthwhile, just reflecting on what we've all lived through over the past 2 years. So here goes. I chose to talk about addressing inequalities through multidisciplinary innovation for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's at the heart of my day job and basically what keeps me up at night. The other reason is that, in my opinion anyway, it's the single biggest barrier, which means that the healthy aging dream, let's be honest, is not really a reality for all, irrespective of education, employment, housing, race, gender, and economic status. This stuff matters, right? Because people in the most deprived areas in regions of the UK are 4 times more likely to die prematurely from chronic diseases. There's also evidence that women in the most deprived areas develop serious long-term conditions nearly 20 years earlier than those in the most prosperous ones. We all celebrate, and that is absolutely to be expected and even encouraged, the great news that there's been a steady increase in average life expectancy in recent decades. In the UK, by 2035, I think the figure says that over half of the adults are expected to be 50 years or over. This is great news. This is great news. Unfortunately, we also know that these increases in life expectancy are not really matched by an equal increase in healthy life expectancy. There is a gap in life expectancy and healthy life expectancy between the most and least deprived areas. And both of these factors are increasing significantly and have widened in recent years. Many people who live in deprived areas become ill much earlier. They get more illnesses and live for longer durations in poor health. The same is also true for most of their neighbors. And let's not forget the COVID pandemic. Sorry, I should say sorry now. I promise it gets happier at the end. But COVID highlighted the value of arriving in later life in good health. 90% of those that died had significant prior poor health. The most deprived places had much higher COVID mortality rates. Older people were most affected, both by the disease, but also the subsequent measures taken to protect them, resulting in social isolation, inactivity, and fear. COVID also raised questions about how we care for people in old age. It accelerated, at least for us, some changes across our communities, highlighting the value of intergenerational interactions, seen for us largely through things like volunteering. but it also challenged our assumptions about what can be done virtually, drawing attention to the issue of digital exclusion. On the digital inequalities piece, it's just not an access problem. It includes skills, not just to operate your laptop or your smartphone, but to use your microwave, your ovens, your washing machines, and your smart meters. I'll be honest, I probably only use about 2 wash functions on my washing machine. The rest of the button, I have no idea what they do. And my job is investing in innovation, and tech is a key element of that. I would also consider myself to be tech savvy. What does that scenario mean for an older adult who is not? In my opinion, the pace of technological advance is immense, and a lot of people are being left behind by supposedly intuitive tech, which in some cases make a lot of assumptions about the end user's digital knowledge and skills. It's not all bad, I recognize that. But in my view, all of these challenges could also be looked at as huge opportunities. It just requires that we work together in a multidisciplinary, collaborative way across academia, public sector, voluntary, charity sectors, and industry. I'm an optimist, so I have to believe that our collective wisdom holds the key to unlocking the healthy aging benefit for everyone, not just for the few. But I also have to be honest, I have a vested interest because I'm not getting any younger. None of us are. Yes, it's a little frustrating, especially looking at what my team have been trying to do for the last 2 years, that there are still so few truly innovative services and products with scalable business models that actually meet the needs of people in later life. It doesn't make any sense. There was a European Union review that estimated that the silver economy generated 4.2 trillion euros in GDP and 78 million jobs. I would guess this would be a similar trend in other parts of the world. So the EU is not unique in that respect. In the UK context, people over 50 hold £3 of every £4 in both housing value and financial wealth. And remember that I mentioned that the forecast is that in the UK by 2035, over half of the adults are expected to be 50 years or over. The need for innovation and its benefit to the economy, to society as a whole, to our health and care systems, and of course the individual is clear. So the question remains, why is it so hard for innovative products and services to gain traction in the market? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. There's age-related prejudice, we can't get away from that, that often ignores older people as a market until they need help. Designers, particularly in tech, are largely young, often lacking the knowledge of and even access to older people to inform the design process. Product offers, where they do exist, often lack a sort of service provider that can thread all of that together, integrate these products into solutions that address real complex needs in a person-centered way. And despite the high proportion of wealth that we've just talked about controlled by older people, most large corporates have yet to focus their marketing towards older populations. Most of the marketing departments are typically staffed by younger people, and most of the developing copy are targeting millennials. There is also, certainly in the UK, a lack of willingness or even ability to pay, either at the individual level, but also through the health and care systems. In my mind, the problem can be summarized as a sort of lack of effective, attractive, and affordable offers. So we all agree that it's complex, it's multifaceted. And in my mind, it's not a shock that consequently, it would require expertise from across different disciplines to arrive at an acceptable solution. So for the past sort of 2.5 years, our team at UK Research and Innovation have commissioned a lot of work and activities to try and help inform what we do with that 98 million that Greg talked about, that we've been charged to manage. We've looked at trying to understand some of the key areas where innovation will have the greatest impact. And we've got a kind of 7 themes approach that runs from everything from physical, how to sustain physical activity, to how to maintain health at work, or even what work in later life should look like, as well as things like cognitive impairment and managing common concerns of aging. And for us, it's not so much the cardiac disease and the diabetes, it's things like incontinence, it's things like mobility, it's eye problems and hearing problems, things that can be quite debilitating. That means that someone's later life is one that is isolated and doesn't allow them to live their best lives, as well as the sort of social connections piece. We've also tried to understand the equity investor landscape. And for us, that really does include social impact investors, so that we can figure out how do we establish a runway of capital that allows some of these solutions to get to market faster and also address the kind of market failure that exists in the system. We've tried to look at how we could support social ventures, so social enterprises and charities, because they have a key role to play. And we know that evidence shows that because of their proximity to local need and patient groups and ordinary citizens, quite frankly, they need a seat on the table to help shape policy and what the future products and services should look like. We've explored how to embed the value of co-production with other people in the innovative process right the way through. So not just at the end with a couple of focus groups, but right the way through. And for us, also the role that design can play, again, right from the point of ideation, rather than just at the end. Some of the key recommendations that have come out of this commissioned work are things like the need to take a holistic view of the elements that need to come together to provide someone with a fulfilling life. So addressing issues such as poverty in later life, social isolation, poor physical health, as well as cognitive decline. But it also highlighted the vital role of a safe outdoor environment. If people don't have safe places to go out, then it makes it less likely that they will go out and be able to sustain their physical health. So for us, what we're trying to say is that it's about people as they age, if you like, changing the point of impact from looking after frail old people to helping people prepare, all people prepare for making the most of their later lives. We've put more emphasis on services with the ability to scale, to deliver the products and services that people really want. And the aim here for us is to focus on the impact that our solutions are having, particularly where that is informed by the voices of older people and their lived experiences. We've also recognized the need to think differently about innovating in this space by working with social enterprises as well as for-profit businesses, in the belief that we think this ultimately enhances the innovation paradigm. A bit of a provocation, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would argue that one of the best ways to prepare society to become more resilient against future pandemics is to put greater emphasis on investing in programs that prevent ill health and promote well-being over those, I would say, that currently focused on largely treating and managing diseases. So I'm on to the cheerful bit, as I promised. I wanted to kind of round up by giving you a couple of highlights of some of the interesting projects that are coming through some of our work with our partners across some of that multidisciplinary teams that I talked about. And for me, I think it gives me a bit of hope of a better future where healthy aging, hopefully, is not just a dream, but a reality and not just an aspiration. So I will start by telling you about the Tribe project. It's led by a small SME called Bronze Labs. And it's a wonderful story because it came about because the founder and the CEO, his mum was diagnosed with a debilitating illness that meant that she needed care. But she was living in a rural part of the UK, which meant that she couldn't access that care. He was frustrated and he was basically being told, really sorry, there isn't anybody servicing that area, so not very much we can do. So he sought to develop a platform, a technology platform powered by AI that's seeking to address some of that national care inequalities at a local level. So it maps out and predicts what the care gaps both in home care provision is, either where it's failing or where it doesn't currently exist at all. And then it seeks to upskill people in those areas of low economic activity and high public service demand so that they can create micro businesses structured as community enterprises to provide the care where it's needed. Another really great example is a product, a solution from a group in Lancashire in England. Again, another sort of poor social economic area. And they're focused on workplace health and enabling people to live healthier working lives. The project is called Business Health Matters. And it's seeking to develop a training package that will provide people working in gyms and leisure centers with the skills to conduct health screenings. This will then allow a service to be delivered which provides health screenings within workplaces and therefore support people to make positive lifestyle choices such as exercising more or looking after their mental health. The vision, the reason I'm excited about the vision is that it extends that whole employee wellness offer, which currently is readily available in large businesses to smaller businesses and their employees. So typically reaching lowest income groups like low paid retail workers or taxi drivers and such. And then one that always brings a smile to my face is called Cricket Cube. I don't know anything about cricket, so I'll put that out there. But it's developing a protocol complete with sort of physical and mental health guidelines to adapt what they call, well, what's called backyard cricket to the older South Asian women to promote their physical health. So for anyone who doesn't know anything about backyard cricket, and I didn't up to the point when I met the group, it's an informal version of the game of cricket, but it can be played anywhere. So in your garden, on the beach, on the streets, basically anywhere. And it means it's accessible and it's physical exercise sort of where you are. So that's exciting. And then the final project that I wanted to talk to you about is aiming to design a service specifically targeting people who are socially isolated as well as digitally excluded, to provide them with sort of social connections and empower them to maintain that social connections going forward, which I think is a great thing. I'll stop there for now and say thank you for your time and the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you today. Yeah, thank you.
Cynthia, thank you very much. And as people start populating some questions, it's a fascinating area that you're working in. And I always think about design processes and incubator hubs that are looking at technology and services or programs to support older people. Yet, as you pointed out, there's never enough involvement or engagement of older people themselves in those processes. And it always inspires me when I see technology companies, particularly in the design area, where they actually have older people as part of their design team or feedback team. It's really important that those people are engaged. And it always fascinates me how people's circumstances, because of their family, particularly in rural and remote areas, come up with innovative solutions. And you certainly talked about that in terms of the TRIDE project. So thank you. And I think of a company here in Toronto called Tribal Scale, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard of them, but you might want to look them up.
Note them down, yeah.
But they are a company that works with technology groups around innovation in tech, where they have design engineers that work in pods on particular projects. And I remember the owner talking to Dr. Barrett and myself about his mother and father being isolated in a rural town, and looking at how they can actually work with Google and those companies to make Alexa and Siri much more interactive around monitoring health or talking about health and those things. And he was saying that they've done some enhancements around some of that technology. And it was the best thing that he ever did, because his mother doesn't always have to talk to his father now. She can talk to Alexa or Siri. So it actually makes quite a difference. So you may want to have a look at what Tribal Scale has been doing. It's very interesting. And the other thing I think, when you're particularly talking about safe spaces, is I think of the age-friendly environments movement, who in that particular example really talked about a bottom-up approach to the development of programs and services around age-friendly. And really you're talking about exactly the same thing, where you're actually engaging with older people to actually help design and create safe spaces in the workplace or at home or in parks and those things. So thank you. Do you have any comments to those thoughts?
No, you're absolutely right. So one of the things that we did quite early on, there's an older people older adult reference group based up in Newcastle, which might not mean very much for anyone else, but they're part of an investment that was made as part of the UK government's action in this area. So the Other People's Network is called Voice, and they're part of the National Institution for National Institute Center for Aging. And one of the things we decided quite early on is that I will not run any panel that seeks to invest in a healthy aging solution without being informed by older people themselves. So we typically will ensure that they get a chance to look at all of the applications. If we're not able to do that, then we will certainly invite them onto the panel where each of the shortlisted projects are selected and awards are ultimately made as a result of those decisions, so that they can truly inform it. And I mean, we're serious about it. So we will, we've had scenarios where older people's views are like, we can't see this working. It's either patronizing or it's not ambitious enough. It's not targeting the right need. And we've said, no, thanks. And often some of the other experts in aging had thought, oh, that was a brilliant idea. But the other people thought, no, this isn't going to fly. So we've said, really sorry, not going to invest in it. So you're absolutely right. And we're looking at other ways to embed it. So we've done quite a series of work through our community of practice, which is a sort of active learning environment that we set up to try and support that best practice sharing across our investments and ensure that sort of at all times where we can come together as a multidisciplinary group to understand what some of the barriers are and just to understand what some of the social, behavioral, cultural barriers might be to really understanding and getting at the heart of what people want. So we've done a number of sort of publications and reports and think pieces to try and explain to people the value of co-production. There's a saying that says nothing for me without me, sort of thing, or paraphrasing of that. People need to start to understand that part of the reason why we believe that these solutions have not scaled and have not received widespread adoption is because often they're developed by people who have no idea what older people actually want, or they kind of the perception of older people is a kind of non-distinct blob, sort of over 50s, as if everyone that's over 50 thinks the same, likes the same things, and has the same interest. Unlike often, actually, the under sort of 50s, there's a lot more sort of segmentation that happens because people recognize that is important. So that's one thing I will say. And your point around accelerators is absolutely correct. So again, one of the things we've tried to do is work with accelerators that really understand social science and arts and humanities, because we think that will underpin the value that the solution will have for older people. So we've sought to sort of invite them as partners of ours to help support the business growth activity that happens for some of our particularly sort of early stage ideas coming out of academia, to make sure that we kind of position people appropriately so that hopefully what comes out at the end is something useful for everyone, not just for the few. So that piece around, you've got to be thinking much broader than just kind of over 50s demographic, and helping them to really think about is this likely to go down a social movement, or is it likely to be a social ventures, or is it better placed as a sort of kind of for-profit business? Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you for that. For me, the challenge is always, and I'm sure everyone that is here today could probably highlight or talk about some really good practice or some innovation that is really going to potentially change the world for older people. Yet the difficulty is, how do other people find out about it?
Yeah.
There isn't enough information sharing, unfortunately, so that that is working really well in one place.
Yeah.
In another country, you don't know about it, or you
don't know about it.
So that's certainly the challenge. So there's a few questions coming in. So I'm going to actually call on three people to pose their questions to you or make some comments. And first on, I'm really going to apologize if I mispronounce people's names. So Shmuel Uraslami, and then Cynthia Stewart, then Susan Mumford, who has a comment. So Shmuel,
I can to start. Is it this creating new opportunities for interdisciplinary collaborations for improvement and increasing equality in access to innovations and to different new technologies.
So,
And
Shmuel, thank you. So the question really is about interdisciplinary collaboration for improvement of equality and access to the mass innovations and modern technology. So what has the what opportunities have been created through COVID? And perhaps we can actually deal with that question, Cynthia, before I go to Cynthia, Stuart, and Susan.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So you're right. There has been, but the key one that we noticed was volunteering. Most of you would attest that during the pandemic, there was a huge sort of grand swell of volunteering activity that people were able to.
Shmuel, are you listening to Cynthia or just walking around the house?
At a local level, which is really great. In fact, one of the projects that had for us that we funded as a result of that is called Be on Hand, and the word they use to describe what they do is they say they're sort of Uber for volunteering. So is the idea that they're able to pull together in a structured way all the people who are interested in volunteering and match them with people who need access to those sorts of support, and also vet all of those people to ensure that they are able to provide the
Sorry,
level
Cynthia.
of
Shmuel, can you just sit down, mate?
That they require in order to address their need. So we have found that an incredible outcome, if you like, as a result of the pandemic, and certainly one that we've sought to continue to investing and support to enable them to do much more than they are. And now they're moving into sort of corporate volunteering. So how do they support corporate companies whose employees would want to give back to their communities? How do they support them in a structured way to be able to do that? And it's fantastic, and they've won a ton of awards as a result.
Cynthia, can I call on you for your question, comment, and then Susan?
Okay. Well, first of all, this was just brilliant. You had me from the beginning, and I so love, because I've said one of the major underpinnings of all of the issues is ageism. Not that there aren't other contributing issues, but it really is ageism. And but my question is really, while I love the intersectional approach you've laid out, this kind of transformation, in my opinion, requires political will.
Absolutely.
And I just think here in the US, we run on election cycles, for example, of 2, 4, or 6 years, and the long runway isn't looked at to make the kind of transformation that is going to be required. And I love that you're an optimist, so I'm sure you have some thoughts about that.
How about I agree? I would love to say that it's different here in the UK, but it isn't. So up until so back when the challenge, if you like, the work we do was developed, it was under a large sort of program of initiatives that the UK government at the time, under Theresa May, who was a prime minister at the time, was really kicking off. It was the industrial strategy. It had, you know, really, it was a very exciting time. It set out sort of 4 grand challenges, as they called them, which sort of covered the aging population as one sort of big overarching challenge. It had digital, sort of digitalization, so sort of digital as one piece. Materials and manufacturing as another piece, and and then something around sort of net zero. So you're right, everybody was excited. It was structured. We had an understanding of the kind of overarching national policy objective, and then how we all dovetailed into that. And then we had a change of prime ministers. Yeah. And now the policy is all about leveling up. And which still fits, but as you can imagine, we all then had to scramble quite quickly to understand what that means for the sorts of work that we do, and how it continues to be contextualized, and how it continues to make sense and be relevant and be seen as relevant by the current government. So you're right, it is a challenge that we are constantly facing, if I'm honest, Cynthia. It is, I won't lie, and we don't really have a magic bullet. We've recently, and I will share it when it's ready to share, but we recently pulled together an impact report to do some of that influencing and just demonstrate that we've started something really great here, and it will be an absolute shame to
Thank you for that question, Cynthia Stewart, and your response, Cynthia. Can I go to Susan Mumford and then to Catherine Klein? Susan, and I'm very sorry that we've got someone that is interrupting this, and I know, June, you're muting that person every time that they open their mouth. So please continue to do that. So Susan and Catherine.
I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that I got to listen into this morning. I'm in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, Canada, which is a relatively small town in a kind of a rural area. I got the link for this from a group I belong to called Aging Well Coalition, and it's a local group in our area that supports advocacy for the aging population. But as a person who also works in a homeless shelter, and I work with disadvantaged people of all different, for all different reasons, I can see so many similarities between the social determinants of health, not only for the aging population, but also for the homeless population or any low income people and, people with disabilities and so on. So I just think that this is really fascinating stuff, and I'm so grateful that I got a chance to listen to it. And I just wanted to thank you for the work you're doing, and hopefully as time goes on, people outside of the UK will listen in more and start to develop some of these programs in other parts of the world. I just think it's great stuff, and I just wanted to thank you for letting me listen in.
Thank you, Susan.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the encouragement, Susan. Yeah, thank you.
Catherine Klein.
Well, I too was really intrigued, and thank you, Dr. Bullock, for what you said. I wondered whether you heard of something that I just learned about last week, which is the World Health Organization's pilot program, initiated first in France and China, but then going broader, called ICOPE, Integrated Care for Older People. And what connected me with what you were saying is they have developed very, very simple ways to quickly train people in how to determine functional abilities. And this can be used by anybody, anywhere, in a clinic, in what you were talking about, in rural areas. And it's a very quick way to survey whether people have certain needs. And then what they do is connect them in that same interdisciplinary way you talked about, with the resources that would be appropriate for that particular person's needs. So I wondered if you had heard about it, and if not, Greg or I can certainly share the connection to you.
Yeah, no, I did. I have this Google News setup thing that means that anything that has the aging on it bounces into my inbox, just so I can see what's happening everywhere else. But you're right. I think it was somebody that said that often the political will yeah, it was Cynthia that was saying the political will to help galvanize that international piece is not always, yeah, it is not always there. But certainly, I know that those who work in this area are on an individual basis really keen to maintain those connections, both from a national context, but also international. So yes, no, I did see that. I think in our context, in some ways, and it's a good thing, the kind of UK government had already kind of started to move towards that sort of integrated care system. So that framework that the WHO highlighted about how to support nations to think much more in an integrated way, in the way that they are able to realize the benefits of healthy aging for their population. So that was already kind of being set up here. So we have now sort of integrated care groups, I guess they're called, integrated care systems. That means that because in the UK, your sort of health service is looked after by the NHS, and then social care, as we say it, is looked after by local authorities, so kind of regional municipals, I guess. And often there isn't a huge amount of interaction between the two, at least in a multidisciplinary way that looks at the person as a whole, rather than, oh, when you're sick, you go to hospital, but when you need some sort of functional care, then, you know, it's not hospital, it's this lot. And then you have to keep talking to different sets of people to who often aren't connected and don't have a sort of comprehensive view of you as an individual. So some of that is happening. As of late last year, the government also published their white paper on sort of reforming adult social care for us. And that sought to look at sort of how to, or sort of their three main objectives was how to ensure that people have more choice, more control, more support to live their independent lives, and how they can access outstanding quality and tailored care and support, and hopefully that people find the adult social care system one that is fair and accessible. And it is about having those sort of simple, easy to understand, easy access to assessments, and people feeling that they can access those things in their time and in the way that they choose to, bearing in mind that a lot of care, let's not forget, is unpaid care, right? It's us looking after loved ones. And it's also, in my mind, there's also something about how do we support and equip ourselves to be able to do that in a way that doesn't mean that we end up sort of unwell ourselves going forward. Yeah, no, so yeah, thank you for raising that.
Thanks, Cynthia. Look, there's a number of comments and questions in the chat box, and you know, I will just summarize a couple of them. And certainly Katsuri Sen was talking about the excellent presentation that you've made, and that older people can't be ignored, and it's the poor that often are. But the issue of technology is racing ahead without any concerns for the use by older people. And I think that's something that you've alluded to. Mark Venning has talked about Aging Well in Canada, which involves older people, and he's put a link to the Aging Well Canada website where they're looking at caregivers in all stages of their research being part of the programs and the development to help bringing new, accessible and affordable technologies into place. So thank you for that, Mark. And I'm a little bit anxious about asking some people now, because it may not be a person, it may well be the hacker, but I know some of you that I know I will refer to. Jane Teasdale, welcome addition always to our Global Cafes. So you've got some comments that you might like to raise now, Jane.
Okay, I will try. Good morning, everyone. Just a couple of points. So definitely thank you for your presentation, Dr. Bullock. And Mosaic at a community level is doing a lot of social interaction with the community of all ages, really. We have a community hub, which we've located in a church. So we have our offices there. We're able to use the grounds of the church. Yesterday, talking about partnership and integration is working with all, the private sector, the not-for-profit sector, and working together. So as an example, yesterday we had an author by the name of Natalie Prezzo, who does walks around the city. And then we partnered with a retirement home and they provided the lunch. This was the first event that we've done in the community for 2 years. And it was people from the community. People came from Thornhill. We had younger people coming with their dogs. And we walked around the Regent Park area and learned about the history. And it was just so interesting. And people were putting in input. Some people lived in that area. So that's the type of thing of connection. We're also doing a presentation online to the IFA members. We're really excited about that. We're presenting and preparing for that with 880 cities. And it's supposed to be worldwide, I think, and somebody had started it. Anyway, we've been working with the individual here in Toronto, and what they've developed are toolkits for community organizations to use community spaces. And how do you do that for social programs rather than people going to community centers? And as you said, sometimes people don't know about these programs running. The other thing that Mosaic has been doing is work on micro mapping. So when we get a client and that client wants to be engaged, we work with our team and social worker and person-centered collaborator in Mosaic, and figuring out that person's area in a 1 kilometer circumference. What are things that they can connect to in the community? So those are just some of the things that we have been working on in the last 2 years. And I just came back from Vancouver, and with a number of people. I was the only private organization. They were all, community organizations, but the main subject was social prescribing. And that has been very popular in the UK. It started in the UK, and now Canada is trying to create a movement on that. So lots of interesting things, but thank you. I enjoyed your presentation immensely.
Thank you very much. No, that's fantastic. I should say we know Age Well very well, and in fact, I was on a call with Michael. I can't remember his last name now. Yesterday, talking about how do we do sort of travel bursaries to help support sort of innovators who want to come over to the UK and those from the UK who want to go over to Canada. I've been to Canada and with Age Well and Cabby and sort of had that. So it's really good. But you're right. It's one of the things we've funded, Jane, are programs that are trying to pull together within a community that kind of the sort of services that are the community services that are available, as well as the opportunities for social prescribing. So they have a kind of one-stop shop to be able to access that, because access is a huge problem. We looked at, should we develop a sort of care navigator? And I know that there's some really interesting ones that are working very well in places like Australia. Our problem in the UK has always been that regions are quite discrete with specific sort of pots of money. And I won't lie, it's hard work trying to get different parts of the country to kind of want to coalesce around something, because often their priority, which is right, their priority is subtly different from one another because of their kind of regional context. But I can't help, that's my infernal optimism rearing its ugly head. I can't help thinking that surely with a collective will, there's something that can be done to try and kind of, I don't know, top slice, whatever, some of that money to try and do some of this collaborative stuff that we're talking about, because that's the only way we're going to get that broad benefit that affects everyone, right? Not just
absolutely, Cynthia. I think, you know, sharing information, sharing knowledge, and actually recognizing that someone might be doing something really well, and why not try and replicate
I
it?
reinvent the wheel. Yeah.
Why reinvent the wheel? And it happens so often. And, you know, I live in Canada where, you know, every province has its own healthcare system and systems, and they don't necessarily innovate based on what another province is doing. You know, we have a really good program for veterans in BC, but that program's not replicated in other provinces. So it's a real challenge. Look, June, if you could put up the tile for next week, because I know we're nearly at the end. Next week, it's going to be our pleasure and honour to have with us Dr. Jacqueline Stark, and she will be talking about the language and ageing in health and following brain damage. So her expertise is in cognitive area, and it's going to be a fascinating, interesting discussion around language and ageing as it particularly impacts older people and those with brain injuries. So please join us next week for that excellent presentation by Jacqueline. So thank you, Jacqueline. And before we close off, please join us next week. And just a reminder that our survey will be going out. I do apologise for the small hack that we had during this presentation and the language that came through on that hack. But thank you to Jun for managing that as best you could. And thank you for Rashmi in our office for streaming this live. You're going to have a little bit of editing to do before we post it onto the IFA website, I'm afraid. But Cynthia, any closing comments from you, some takeaway messages, and thank you to everyone for being with us today. So Cynthia, the floor is yours for the last minute.
Yeah, so my takeaway messages, I'll tell you a few home truths and then hopefully a call to action. So very quickly, the pandemic has undoubtedly accelerated the pace of change in the way that we live, work, and look after our health. So that's fine. And we know that there's greater demand on digital technologies to support everything from home working to wearable devices and care needs. And we also know that aging population is a global challenge. We've literally all just been talking about it, which is great. And in my mind, this is absolutely the case for partnership working across unfamiliar disciplines. It's going to be scary, but I think we can do it. I think we need to bring together social sciences, behavioral sciences, things that aren't, natural bedfellows, with biological and medical, engineering, arts and humanities. Arts and humanities are hugely important to people's lives across things like academia, industry, public sector. We have to work together. We have to. That is the only way we're going to realize the benefits that we all desperately want. I want it. I want to age well. I want to age in a way that is, typified by dignity and independence. And that's what I want. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a fantastically insightful discussion, and encouraging too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia, and it was a pleasure to have you. And please, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. See you next Friday, and please enjoy your weekend with family and friends.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.